I'm Dorothy, 32 years old, and I've just arrived back in my hometown for my dad's 60th birthday dinner. After 8 years of building my business states away, I thought maybe time had healed old wounds. My sister Judith's text seemed friendly enough, but as I stand outside this fancy restaurant, my stomach twists with anxiety. I'm hoping tonight will be different, that maybe we can finally be a real family again. I had no idea that in just a few hours, I'd be sitting alone by the trash cans while my family laughed. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family drama. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in the affluent part of Westbrook, our family had a certain reputation to maintain. My father George built his real estate development company from scratch, turning it into a multi-million-dollar business by the time I was 10. Our sprawling 5-bedroom colonial house with its manicured lawn and swimming pool was the envy of the neighborhood. My mother Martha was the quintessential socialite, hosting charity galas and country club events that everyone wanted invitations to. And then there was my sister Judith, 4 years older than me, and the absolute apple of my parents' eyes. She was everything I wasn't. While I preferred math and computers, Judith excelled at piano recitals and ballet performances. She had this perfect laugh that charmed everyone, and a way of making herself the center of attention in any room. "Dorothy, why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unofficial family motto throughout my childhood. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would nod distractedly. When Judith brought home B's and a participation award in the school talent show, they took her out for ice cream and displayed her certificate on the refrigerator for months. I can still remember my 12th birthday when I begged for a computer. Instead, I got a dress I would never wear and a makeup set I had no interest in. "These will help you be more presentable, sweetheart," my mother had said with that tight smile of hers. 2 weeks later, they bought Judith a car for her 16th birthday, even though she had just failed her driving test. The pattern continued throughout high school. I joined the robotics club and helped our team win the state championship. My parents couldn't attend because they were watching Judith perform in a community theater production, where she had exactly 3 lines. When I received a partial scholarship to college for computer science, my father's only comment was, "It's a shame it's not a full ride like your sister's drama scholarship." What my parents failed to notice was how Judith deliberately sabotaged any moment that should have been mine. Like the time she accidentally spilled punch on my graduation dress minutes before the ceremony. Or how she announced her engagement during my college graduation dinner. These weren't coincidences. They were calculated moves to keep the spotlight firmly on her. By the time I graduated college, I knew I needed to leave. With my computer science degree and a small loan from a mentor who actually believed in me, I moved across the country to Seattle and founded my startup, NeuroSync Solutions. The first few years were brutal. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, working 18-hour days, eating ramen noodles, and doubting myself constantly. During those difficult times, my family rarely called. When I did reach out, conversations were brief and centered around Judith's latest accomplishments. My company specialized in artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare providers. We created software that could predict patient outcomes and streamline treatment protocols. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was meaningful, and slowly but surely, we gained traction. After 5 years of grinding, we secured our first major contract with a hospital chain. 2 years after that, we expanded into international markets. Throughout those 8 years away, my contact with family dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional text message. My father would sometimes call to check in, asking basic questions about my work without really understanding what I did. My mother's communications were even more sparse, usually relayed through my father. Judith only reached out when she needed something, or wanted to share news about her growing family with husband Frank. So when my father called last month about his 60th birthday celebration, I was surprised by the warmth in his voice. "Dorothy, it wouldn't be the same without you," he said. "I miss my little girl. Please come home for this." Something in his tone made me believe him, made me hope that perhaps time had softened the family dynamics. I spent weeks preparing for this trip. I bought an elegant navy blue dress from a designer boutique. I selected thoughtful gifts for everyone. For my father, a rare first edition of his favorite mystery novel. For my mother, a handcrafted silver necklace from an artisan I discovered during a business trip to Milan. For Judith and Frank, I purchased premium tickets to a Broadway show they could use during their upcoming anniversary trip. I even bought presents for their children, my niece and nephew whom I barely knew. As my plane touched down in my hometown airport, I felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, I could finally be seen. The taxi ride from the airport to my hotel brought back a flood of memories. We passed my old high school, the ice cream parlor where I had my first job, and the park where I used to escape with a book when family tensions ran high. The familiar landscapes looked smaller somehow, less significant than they had in my memories. I'd decided to book a hotel room rather than stay at my parents' house. The thought of sleeping in my childhood bedroom, still decorated with the pink frills my mother had chosen despite my protests, was more than I could bear. Plus, having a neutral space to retreat to seemed like a wise precaution. After checking in and refreshing from the flight, I called an Uber to take me to my parents' house for our pre-dinner family gathering. The driver, a chatty woman named Carol, asked if I was visiting family. Yes, my dad's birthday, I said, trying to sound more excited than anxious. That's nice. Family's everything, isn't it? She said, smiling at me through the rearview mirror. I just nodded, unable to agree but not wanting to explain the complicated truth to a stranger. My childhood home looked exactly the same, as though frozen in time. The same meticulous landscaping, the same pristine white exterior, the same brass knocker on the front door that I'd polished countless times as part of my chores. I stood on the porch for a moment, taking a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. My father opened the door, his face lighting up with what seemed like genuine pleasure. Dorothy, you made it! He pulled me into a hug, and for a moment, I felt like that little girl who used to run to him with scraped knees and broken toys, believing he could fix anything. Hi, Dad. Happy birthday, I said, returning his embrace. He looked older, his hair now completely silver, new lines etched around his eyes, but his smile was the same. He ushered me inside, where my mother waited in the foyer. Martha's appearance was as impeccable as always, not a hair out of place, dressed in a tailored beige pantsuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dorothy, welcome home, she said, giving me an air kiss near each cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. You look professional. That dress must have been expensive. I recognized the familiar backhanded compliment but chose to ignore it. Thanks, Mom. It's good to see you too. As we moved to the living room, I heard the front door open again, and Judith's voice filled the house. We're here. Where's the birthday boy? My sister swept in like a force of nature, her husband Frank following behind with their two children, a boy and a girl aged about 7 and 5. Judith looked like an older version of her high school self, still perfectly put together in a designer dress, her hair styled in elegant waves. Dorothy! She exclaimed with exaggerated surprise, as though she hadn't known I was coming. Wow! You actually made it! I told Mom you probably wouldn't be able to get away from your little computer job. It's good to see you too, Judith, I said, forcing a smile. And this must be Frank. Nice to finally meet you in person. Frank seemed uncomfortable with the family dynamics but shook my hand warmly. I've heard a lot about you, he said, which made me wonder exactly what he'd heard and from whom. Judith quickly pulled him away to greet our parents, whispering something to our mother while glancing back at me. Martha's expression changed subtly, her eyes narrowing as she looked me over again. My father, perhaps sensing the tension, tried to bridge the gap. Dorothy's doing really well with her company, he announced. Something with computers and hospitals, right, sweetheart? Artificial intelligence for healthcare, I corrected gently. We've expanded to 3 countries now. That's nice, my mother said dismissively before turning to Judith. Now tell us about Tyler's piano recital. I bet he was the star of the show. I used the moment to retrieve the gifts I'd brought from my bag. I have some presents for everyone, I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice. I watched as they opened them, hoping for some recognition of the thought I'd put into each selection. My father seemed genuinely touched by the rare book, running his fingers over the leather binding with appreciation. This is incredible, Dorothy. Thank you. My mother examined the silver necklace with a critical eye. It's very unique, she said, which in her vocabulary meant she didn't like it. I noticed she didn't put it on. Judith and Frank's reaction to the Broadway tickets was lukewarm at best. Oh, these must have been expensive, Judith said with a hint of suspicion, as if questioning how I could afford such a gift. But we're actually thinking of changing our anniversary plans. Still, it's the thought that counts. In contrast, when Judith presented our father with a photo album of family pictures, everyone gathered around, oohing and ahhing over each page. I noticed that the photos were predominantly of Judith's family, with only a few obligatory childhood shots that included me. This is the most thoughtful gift, my mother gushed, patting Judith's hand. So personal and meaningful. I swallowed my disappointment and focused on interacting with my niece and nephew, who were cautiously curious about their aunt who existed primarily in occasional FaceTime calls. They warmed up slightly when I gave them the educational games I'd chosen, though Judith quickly interjected that they already had so many toys they don't need. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself increasingly on the periphery of conversations, watching as the family I'd been born into operated like a well-oiled machine that had no place for me. My father made occasional efforts to include me, asking about my life in Seattle, but these inquiries were frequently redirected by Judith or my mother. Finally, the conversation turned to logistics for the evening's dinner. "We've reserved the private dining room at Le Chateau," my mother announced. 7 o'clock sharp. "Dorothy, do you need directions?" "It's that new French restaurant downtown." "I can find it," I replied. "I'll just meet you all there." "Nonsense," Judith interjected. "We should all go together. Family arrival, right, Dad? I'm sure Dorothy doesn't mind squeezing in with us." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I nodded agreement. "Sure, that works too." As we prepared to leave for the restaurant, I caught Judith pulling my mother aside again, both of them glancing my way with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. Whatever was said, my mother nodded in agreement before approaching me with a too bright smile. "All set, dear? We're so looking forward to celebrating with the whole family tonight." Despite my misgivings, I found myself hoping that maybe, just maybe, the evening would bring the connection I'd been missing for so long. Le Chateau was the epitome of upscale dining, with its stone facade and elegant French architecture. Valet attendants in crisp uniforms stood ready to park the arriving vehicles. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through the windows, casting a golden glow onto the sidewalk. This was clearly the kind of establishment where dinner for one would cost what most people might spend on groceries for a week. We arrived in 2 cars, my parents and I in one, Judith's family in another. As we walked toward the entrance, I noticed several other vehicles pulling up, disgorging familiar faces from my childhood. Extended family members whom I hadn't seen in years emerged in their finest attire. My father's brother William and his wife Jane. Cousins I barely recognized now as adults. My mother's sister Rita and her husband Harold. "Quite a turnout," I commented to my father. "Only the best for the big 6-0, he replied, patting my shoulder affectionately. Inside, the restaurant was even more impressive. Soft classical music played in the background. The scent of fine cuisine and expensive perfume mingled in the air. A maitre d' greeted us with practiced charm, checking the reservation before leading us toward a private dining room at the back of the restaurant. "Dorothy!" My cousin Beverly rushed forward, enveloping me in a hug that seemed genuine. "Oh my God, how long has it been? You look amazing." "Thanks, Bev. You too," I said, returning her embrace. "Must be what, 7 years?" "At least. You have to tell me everything about Seattle. I hear it's just gorgeous there." As Beverly began asking about my life, Judith appeared as if summoned by the attention I was receiving. "Beverly, have you seen Mom's new grandchildren pictures? Tyler just won his first piano competition, and Lily started ballet." "Oh, I'd love to see," Beverly exclaimed, her focus immediately diverted. This pattern repeated with each family member who approached me. Initial excitement at seeing me after so long, questions about my life and career, then Judith materializing to redirect the conversation. After the 3rd time, it became impossible to ignore the deliberate nature of these interruptions. "I'm going to use the restroom before we sit down," I announced to no one in particular, needing a moment to collect myself. The ladies' room was as luxurious as the rest of the restaurant, with marble countertops and plush hand towels. I was just about to exit the stall when I heard the main door open and recognized Judith's voice, along with our cousin Karen's. "It's all for show," Judith was saying. "Her company is barely staying afloat. Dad told me she asked for money last year, but was too proud to admit it to anyone else." I froze. This was a complete fabrication. My company had been profitable for 3 years, and I had never asked my father for money. In fact, I had offered to help with his medical bills after his brief hospitalization last year, an offer he had politely declined. "Really? She seems to be doing well," Karen replied, sounding uncertain. "Trust me, it's all smoke and mirrors. That's why we had to be careful with the seating arrangements tonight. Dad feels obligated to include her, but we don't want her asking everyone for investments or loans during his birthday dinner. I remained in the stall, blood rushing in my ears, until I heard them leave. Taking several deep breaths, I reminded myself that I had come here for my father, not to engage in Judith's petty games. I would get through this evening with dignity, regardless of what she might have planned. When I returned to the private dining room, I discovered that everyone was already being seated. The large rectangular table was beautifully set with fine china, crystal glasses, and elaborate floral centerpieces. Name cards marked each place setting. Family members were finding their assigned seats, exclaiming over the elegant arrangements. I circled the table, looking for my name among the cards. After checking each place setting twice, confusion settled in. My name was nowhere to be found. Mom, I approached Martha, who was directing people to their seats like a general organizing troops. I don't see my place card. She glanced up, a flicker of something unidentifiable crossing her face. Oh, Judith handled the seating arrangements. Check with her. I spotted Judith across the room, smiling as she helped her daughter into a booster seat next to her own chair. As I approached, the smile on her face transformed into something else entirely, a smirk that sent a chill down my spine. Judith, I can't find my seat, I said simply. She looked up at me, then gestured toward the far corner of the room where a small fold-out chair had been placed next to the service station and, mortifyingly, the trash cans used by the waitstaff. Sorry, this table's for family only, she said loudly enough for those nearby to hear, pointing toward the isolated chair. We had to make some adjustments when the cousins confirmed. I'm sure you understand. The room fell silent as heads turned to observe this exchange. I stood frozen, the humiliation washing over me in waves. My father half rose from his seat at the head of the table, a troubled expression on his face, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. A few uncomfortable chuckles broke the silence, then more, building into a ripple of laughter that seemed to confirm my status as the family joke. Even my father eventually offered a strained smile, as if to suggest it was all in good fun. In that moment, I considered walking out. My feet actually took a small step toward the exit. But something stopped me, a determination not to give Judith the satisfaction of driving me away. I had come for my father's birthday, and I would stay for that reason alone. With as much dignity as I could muster, I walked to the fold-out chair and sat down. From this position, I could see the entire family but was clearly not part of the gathering. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd written it on the wall. I might share their blood, but I would never truly belong. A young waiter named Samuel, according to his name tag, approached with a water pitcher, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes conveying sympathy. Would you like a menu, ma'am? He asked quietly. Yes, please, I replied, grateful for this small courtesy. As he handed me the menu, he whispered, I can move you to the main dining room if you prefer. We have available tables. The kindness of this stranger nearly broke my composure, but I shook my head. Thank you, but I'll stay here. Family obligation. He nodded with understanding before moving away, leaving me to observe the celebration from my designated position of exclusion. From my isolated seat in the corner, I had an unobstructed view of my family celebration. The dinner proceeded with an opulence that bordered on obscene. My father, seated at the head of the table, looked uncomfortable at times but was quickly distracted by the parade of extravagances Judith had orchestrated. Without consulting anyone about preferences or budget, Judith and my mother ordered multiple bottles of Dom Perignon at $300 each. Only the best for Daddy, Judith proclaimed, raising a toast that everyone enthusiastically joined. No one bothered to pour a glass for me or include me in the toast. The appetizers arrived, an array of foie gras, truffle-infused seafood, and caviar selections. I watched as family members exclaimed over each dish, photographing their food for social media before tasting it. My own menu sat untouched beside me. When Samuel returned to take my order, I requested a simple salad and the least expensive entree, acutely aware that I had no idea who would be paying for this lavish affair. Are you sure that's all? Samuel asked, his brow furrowing. Yes, thank you, I replied. I'm not particularly hungry. From my vantage point, I observed the family dynamics with new clarity. My father occasionally glanced my way with an expression that might have been guilt, but he never made a move to include me or acknowledge the inappropriateness of my seating arrangement. My mother was fully engaged in playing the perfect hostess, complimenting the chef and ensuring everyone's glasses remained full. She didn't look in my direction once. Judith was in her element, holding court at the center of the table. She directed the conversation like a conductor leading an orchestra, ensuring she remained the focal point, while strategically highlighting her children's accomplishments and her own role as the devoted daughter and perfect mother. "Tyler, show Grandpa how you can count to 100 in French," she urged her son, beaming with pride as he performed for the admiring audience. We enrolled him in that exclusive language immersion program. It was quite competitive to get in, but you know how these things go when they see true potential. My cousin Beverly made a brief attempt to include me, calling across the room, "Dorothy, how's the tech scene in Seattle? I heard it's booming right now." Before I could answer, Judith interjected, "Speaking of careers, did I mention Frank just made partner at his law firm? The youngest partner in the firm's history." Frank, to his credit, looked embarrassed by this pronouncement. "It's not that big a deal, really," he mumbled, shooting me an apologetic glance. As the main courses arrived, I had an epiphany about Judith's behavior over the years. This wasn't just casual sibling rivalry or thoughtlessness. She had been systematically working to eliminate me from the family narrative for as long as I could remember. Each interruption, each redirection, each staged humiliation was designed to ensure that I remained an outsider, preventing any meaningful connections from forming between me and the rest of the family. I remembered the time in high school when I had been invited to join my cousins for a weekend trip to the lake. Judith had told them I declined because I thought such activities were beneath me, when in reality, I'd never received the invitation at all. Or the family Christmas where gifts I'd mailed arrived mysteriously damaged, with Judith suggesting I hadn't packaged them properly because I was too busy with work to care about family traditions. Samuel brought my salad, setting it before me with a small, encouraging smile. "Can I get you anything else?" he asked. "No, this is perfect, thank you," I replied, noticing how he'd taken extra care with the presentation of my simple dish. While picking at my salad, I excused myself to use the restroom, taking my phone with me. In a private stall, I texted my friend Donna back in Seattle. Sitting by the literal trash at Dad's B-Day dinner, Sister made sure I wasn't at family table. Considering making a scene versus quiet dignity versus Irish exit. Thoughts? Donna's response came quickly. What would CEO Dorothy do? The one who negotiated that impossible Kaiser contract and made them thank her for it? I smiled at the memory. Last year, I'd walked into a meeting with healthcare executives who had initially dismissed me and walked out with a multi-million-dollar contract on terms favorable to my company. I'd done it not by losing my cool, but by recognizing my value and refusing to accept anything less than the respect I deserved. When I returned to the dining room, something had shifted inside me. I no longer felt like the excluded little sister desperate for approval. Instead, I observed the scene with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. These people, with their petty dynamics and superficial values, couldn't diminish me unless I allowed them to. My father stood to give a speech as dessert was being served, an elaborate triple chocolate cake decorated with edible gold leaf. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate with me," he began, raising his champagne glass. "Having family around is the greatest gift a man could ask for on his birthday." His eyes swept the room, briefly landing on me before quickly moving on. "Martha, my beautiful wife of 35 years, thank you for organizing this wonderful evening. Judith, my amazing daughter, thank you for handling all the details so perfectly, as you always do. And to everyone else, thank you for being part of our family's journey." The omission of my name wasn't subtle. A few awkward glances were cast in my direction, but most people seemed not to notice or care about my exclusion from his acknowledgments. As everyone applauded his speech, I sat with my hands in my lap, maintaining a neutral expression despite the sting. When the cake was distributed, no slice made its way to my corner. I took out my phone and quietly documented the evening, capturing images of the lavish celebration and my isolated position. These weren't for social media or revenge. They were for my own reference, a reminder of the reality I was finally ready to accept. As family members began presenting their gifts, I observed the performances with detached interest. Each gift was accompanied by effusive expressions of love and inside jokes, reinforcing the bonds from which I had been excluded. When it came time for my gift to be opened, my father seemed genuinely pleased with the rare first edition, but Judith quickly redirected attention. "That must have cost a fortune," she commented with a raised eyebrow. "I guess some people think expensive gifts make up for not being present in other ways." A few uncomfortable chuckles followed her remark. I remained silent, refusing to defend myself against the unfair characterization. Just then, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. Seeing it was from my CFO, I stepped outside to take it. Dorothy, sorry to bother you during family time, but I thought you'd want to know immediately, my CFO said excitedly. The MedTech acquisition just approved our bid. We got it. All terms accepted exactly as proposed. I leaned against the restaurant's exterior wall, processing this information. The acquisition we'd been working on for months had just gone through, adding a projected 30% to our annual revenue and significantly expanding our technological capabilities. This was the kind of business victory that would make headlines in industry publications. That's incredible news, Rachel. Thank you for letting me know right away, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling within me. Congratulations, boss. You made this happen. We'll pop champagne when you get back. As I ended the call, a strange calm settled over me. Inside that restaurant was a family that had never valued me or my accomplishments. They had relegated me to the trash corner without a second thought. Yet here I stood, having built something meaningful entirely on my own terms. I returned to my seat with new resolve, observing the continued celebrations with the confidence of someone who no longer needed the approval of those present. The contrast between my professional success and personal rejection couldn't have been more stark, but for the first time, I felt completely at peace with it. As the evening drew to a close, I noticed the waitstaff beginning to prepare the bill. Samuel caught my eye from across the room, a question in his expression. I gave him a small nod, curious to see how this final act would play out. The celebratory atmosphere in the private dining room began to wind down as coffee and digestives were served. Family members were sharing final stories and reminiscing about past gatherings. No one had made any effort to include me in these conversations, and by this point, I preferred it that way. My isolation had become a form of clarity, allowing me to see the family dynamics without the emotional fog that had clouded my judgment for years. Samuel approached with a leather folder containing the bill. To everyone's surprise, particularly Judith's, he walked directly to my corner and presented it to me with a respectful nod. "Whenever you're ready, ma'am," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. A confused murmur spread through the room. Judith's face contorted with indignation. "Why is she getting the bill? Dad's the guest of honor, obviously he's not paying. And I arranged everything with the manager earlier." I accepted the folder from Samuel with a calm, "Thank you," and opened it to review the charges. The total made my eyebrows rise slightly, $4,900.42. The itemized list told the story of extraordinary extravagance. Multiple bottles of premium champagne, the most expensive items on the menu ordered in abundance, specialty cocktails, and supplemental charges for the private room and extended service. "There must be some mistake," my mother called out, her voice brittle with embarrassment. "Dorothy shouldn't have the bill." I looked up from the leather folder, meeting Samuel's eyes with a small smile. "No mistake," I said quietly. "The reservation was confirmed under my name when I called to add my credit card to the file last week." This was a lie, of course, but I wanted to see how the family would react. My father half rose from his seat, reaching for his wallet. "Dorothy, please, I'll take care of it." This was my celebration after all. Judith wasn't having it. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She can't afford this. She's just trying to make some kind of point." I turned the pages of the bill slowly, examining each charge with deliberate attention, allowing the uncomfortable silence to stretch. Finally, I looked up, addressing the room at large but focusing on no one in particular. "Did you know that NeuroSync Solutions, my little computer job as Judith calls it, was valued at $67 million in our last funding round?" I said conversationally, as though discussing the weather. "We operate in 3 countries, employ over 80 people, and our AI systems are currently helping diagnose patients in 27 major hospitals." The silence in the room was absolute. I continued, my voice steady and professional, the same tone I used in board meetings. Just before dessert was served, I received a call confirming our acquisition of MedTech Innovations, a deal worth approximately $12 million that will expand our capabilities in preventative care algorithms. So to answer your concern, Judith, yes, I can afford this bill. In fact, I could purchase this entire restaurant if I were so inclined. Judith's face had drained of color. "You're making this up," she accused, but her voice lacked conviction. I reached for my phone, pulled up our company website, and handed it to my nearest cousin. Feel free to verify. Our recent press releases are under the News tab. As the phone was passed around, expressions of shock and reassessment appeared on family members' faces. My father looked stunned, my mother uncomfortable, and Judith increasingly agitated. If this is true, why didn't you ever tell us? My father asked, genuine confusion in his voice. I tried, Dad, I replied gently. Every time I called. Every holiday. Every brief visit. But there were always more important topics to discuss. I didn't add that those topics inevitably centered around Judith and her family. At that moment, the restaurant manager appeared, smiling broadly when he spotted me. Ms. Walker, I didn't realize you were dining with us tonight. It's an honor to have you here. Judith's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You know my sister? The manager looked confused. Of course. Ms. Walker was featured in Business Insider's 40 Under 40 Feet issue last month. We have it framed in our office. Her company's healthcare algorithms are revolutionary. He turned back to me. My mother's early-stage cancer was detected using your software at Seattle Grace. The doctor said it might have been missed otherwise. This unexpected validation left the family speechless. The manager continued, oblivious to the tension. Please let me know if there's anything else we can do to make your evening special. After he departed, I returned my attention to the bill, aware that every eye in the room was now fixed on me. The waiter stood patiently at my side, waiting for my decision. In this moment, I held a power I had never experienced with my family before. The ability to either punish or forgive, to be petty or magnanimous. I looked up at Samuel, whose kind eyes had offered the only warmth I'd received all evening, and then around at my family's expectant faces. I smiled and said the words I'd been rehearsing in my mind since that phone call outside. I'll cover my portion of the bill, I said, calculating roughly what my salad and entree had cost, along with a generous tip for Samuel. The rest is for the actual family celebration. My father immediately stepped forward. I'll take care of the remainder, he said, reaching for the bill with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between shame and newfound respect. As he processed the payment, I rose from my isolated chair, gathering my purse and coat. The room had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, everyone watching to see what would happen next. I knew this was my moment to either burn bridges or begin building new ones on my own terms. Thank you all for allowing me to be part of this evening, I said, addressing the room at large. My voice was calm and measured, neither accusatory nor bitter. It's been illuminating. I turned to my father, whose face had aged 10 years in the past hour. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope your 60th year brings you clarity and joy. I leaned in to kiss his cheek, whispering, when you're ready to have a relationship independent of Judith's influence, I'm a phone call away. His eyes glistened as he nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. My mother approached cautiously, her social mask firmly in place. Dorothy, perhaps we could have lunch before you leave town? Just the two of us? I'll check my schedule, I replied noncommittally. We both knew what this sudden interest was really about, but I left the door cracked open, neither slamming it shut nor rushing to walk through. Judith stood rigidly by the table, her expression a complex mixture of emotions, none of them particularly sisterly. When our eyes met, I simply gave her a small nod, the kind you might offer a distant acquaintance. No words were necessary. We both understood exactly where we stood. As I walked through the restaurant toward the exit, a strange lightness filled my steps. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't leaving a family gathering feeling diminished or inadequate. Instead, I felt liberated from the need for their approval or understanding. In my hotel room that night, the emotional impact of the evening finally hit me. I kicked off my heels, curled up on the bed, and let the tears come, not tears of sorrow, but of release. Years of pent-up hurt, disappointment, and rejection flowed out, leaving space for something new to grow. I called Donna, who answered immediately despite the late hour. How did it go? Do I need to post bail? Her question made me laugh through my tears. No bail necessary. I think I just graduated from being the family doormat. I recounted the evening's events, from the humiliating seating arrangement to the revelation of my success, and the final bill situation. Donna listened without interruption until I finished. I'm so proud of you, she said finally. You didn't let them make you small. You showed up as your full self, even when they tried to diminish you. It feels like the end of something, I admitted, but also like a beginning. That's exactly what it is, Donna replied. The end of seeking their approval and the beginning of relationships on your terms, if they're willing to meet you there. After we hung up, I stood by the hotel window, looking out at the town that had once defined my existence. Tomorrow, I would board a plane back to Seattle, back to the life and community I had built for myself. The people who valued me, not for who they wanted me to be, but for who I actually was. 1 week later, back in my Seattle office overlooking Puget Sound, I found myself immersed in the medtech acquisition details. The familiar rhythm of work was comforting after the emotional turbulence of my hometown visit. My team had welcomed me back with genuine enthusiasm and a cake celebrating our newest business victory. I had sent brief, polite thank you messages to my extended family members, but had maintained radio silence with my immediate family, giving both them and myself space to process what had happened at the restaurant. 3 months passed. Spring turned to summer in Seattle, bringing longer days and the vibrant energy that always seemed to infuse the city during this season. My company continued to thrive, with the medtech integration proceeding even more smoothly than anticipated. I had expanded our office space and hired 15 new employees, including a talented developer who had previously worked at one of the tech giants. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, my assistant informed me that my father was on the phone. This wasn't entirely unexpected. I'd been wondering when one of my parents would eventually reach out. "Dad?" I answered, keeping my tone neutral but not cold. "How are you, Dorothy?" he said, his voice carrying an emotional weight I wasn't accustomed to hearing. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since your visit. About the restaurant, about everything, really." "I see," I replied, neither encouraging nor discouraging him from continuing. "I'm not proud of how things went that night. Or for a long time before that," he admitted. "I let your mother and sister shape our family dynamics in ways that weren't fair to you. I convinced myself it was easier to go along with it than to create conflict, but that was cowardice on my part." His candor surprised me. "Thank you for saying that, Dad." "I saw that article about you in Business Insider," he continued. "I had no idea, Dorothy. All these years, I never really understood what you were building. I just knew it was something with computers." "It can be hard to explain," I acknowledged, softening slightly at his evident regret. "I'd like to visit you in Seattle," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "Just me. To see your company, your life there. To get to know my daughter again if she's willing." I felt a complex mixture of emotions: wariness, hope, and a cautious optimism. "I think I'd like that, Dad. But it needs to be just you, not a family delegation." "Understood," he agreed quickly. "Your mother, she's processing things in her own way. After your Business Week feature came out last month, her friends from the country club started asking about you. Suddenly, she's telling everyone how proud she is of her successful daughter in tech. It's not genuine yet, but it's a start." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. "And Judith?" He sighed heavily. "Judith is struggling with the new dynamic. She's always defined herself as the successful daughter, the center of attention. Seeing you achieve this level of success independently has been challenging for her." "That's not my problem to solve," I said firmly. "No, it isn't," he agreed, surprising me again. "That's for her to work through. I just want you to know I'm trying to create some healthier boundaries, for all our sakes." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, contemplating this potential new chapter in our relationship. I wasn't naive enough to believe that one phone call could heal decades of dysfunction. But it was a step in a direction I hadn't thought possible before. 2 weeks later, I hosted a celebration at my penthouse apartment, overlooking Lake Union. It wasn't for a family milestone or holiday, but rather to commemorate the 5th anniversary of my company's founding. Around me gathered the people who had become my chosen family over the years. Donna, who had believed in me when my own family didn't. Rachel, my CFO, who had taken a chance on joining a startup led by a young female founder. Samuel, the kind waiter from the restaurant whom I'd hired as our office manager after learning about his business administration degree and desire to leave the service industry. And a dozen others who had supported my journey in various ways. As we raised glasses to toast our collective achievements, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the family I had created for myself. These were people who celebrated my successes without jealousy, who offered support during challenges without judgment, who saw me clearly and valued what they saw. My father's visit was scheduled for the following month. I had no illusions that rebuilding our relationship would be easy, or that my mother and sister would suddenly transform into the supportive family I had longed for as a child. But I was approaching this new phase from a position of strength and self-knowledge that I hadn't possessed before. The truth I had finally embraced was that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who shows up for you, who makes space for your whole self, who contributes to your growth, rather than diminishing it. Sometimes the family you're born into fulfills these needs. Other times you need to create your own family of choice. As I looked around at the smiling faces in my living room, I realized that the lonely little girl who had once desperately sought approval from people incapable of giving it had grown into a woman surrounded by genuine connection and appreciation. The pain of rejection had become the foundation for something far more valuable: the wisdom to recognize authentic relationships and the courage to nurture them. I no longer needed a seat at my family's table to feel complete. I had built my own table, one where everyone was welcomed, valued, and seen. And that, I discovered, was the most powerful response to exclusion I could have possibly created. So what about you? Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who couldn't appreciate your worth? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult family dynamics. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from a table where you're not appreciated and build your own instead. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to stand in your truth, just as I eventually found mine.